Wee woo wee woo. Hey, I'm just letting you guys know, I'm sorry I messed up the audio of recording this video, but it gets better after like a couple minutes, so just hang in there. I love you, thank you. I love Metal Gear Rising. You've read the title, you've seen the memes. This game is a good one, and I'm gonna get right into the thick of it and tell you why. Okay, here's where I admit that I've never played a Metal Gear game before. As horrific a crime that is, most of them were released before my time on the gaming scene, and although they've always been on my radar, I haven't had the opportunity to play one before Rising. Luckily, you don't need to have played any Metal Gear games to understand the story of Metal Gear Rising, which is good for me and probably a lot of you guys as well. With that being said, I'm gonna spoil this whole game, so watch this video at your own risk. I think many people's perception of this game is that it has incredibly fun gameplay but a weak story, and I'm gonna tell you that this is anything but true. Metal Gear Rising is a ridiculous, over-the-top action movie that is able to simultaneously have you grinning from ear to ear while a cyborg ninja cuts a plane in half, and ponder the philosophies of a collection of heroes and villains in a fight to bend the world to their wills. And also there's a really good game attached. And one of my favorite video game soundtracks. Can you tell I like this game? The game opens in Africa. Our main character Raiden is in a car speaking with the Prime Minister of Africa. He's thanking Raiden for helping keep Africa peaceful using his private military company, which Raiden likes to use for security reasons. Actually, let me give you some backstory on this guy. Raiden is a cyborg ninja who is friends with Solid Snake and also a member of Maverick, which is a private military company. He does things like kill bad guys and escort prime ministers to earn money. He's got a whole lot of stupid nicknames too. You'll hear people call him stuff like Jack the Ripper or Mr. Lightning Bolt, because he has a bit of a reputation for killing a whole lot of people. Back to Africa though. The Prime Minister's car is suddenly halted by a mysterious, sexy man. His name is Jetstream Sam, and he's here with his little lackeys to kill the Prime Minister. Ryan's not taking that though, so he gets to work turning all these soldier guys into cold cuts. While that's going on, a giant evil robot jumps out of the ocean to assist the Prime Minister killing squad. Also, a big bad guy named Sundowner shows up, kills the Prime Minister's bodyguards, and kidnaps the Prime Minister. He explains to Raiden that he wants to kill the Prime Minister in order to incite war in Africa so he can sell weapons to African countries and make loads of money. Kind of an amateur move giving away his whole plan like that, but he has giant scissors attached to his arms, so you know, who's gonna stop him? I know I just dumped a lot of information on you guys, but I promise the beginning is the most confusing part. Probably. What's important is that you know that Jetstream Sam, Sundowner, and the giant robot are all working together to kill the Prime Minister to start a war in Africa, and Raiden is trying to stop them. Sundowner runs away with the minister and leaves the giant robot to stop Raiden from living. Keep in mind, this is like 10 minutes into the game and you're fighting this ridiculously large robot. I love it so much. For a first time player, you're probably going to be really confused at this point, trying to piece together a plot in the game's controls, but there's one thing you'll discover for certain in this fight. The soundtrack slaps. There's a moment in the robot fight where he swings a giant sword at you and you catch it, and suddenly the music that's been in the background becomes much louder and the lyrics come in and oh, it's such a beautiful moment. Listen to this. This is the first of so many points in this game where I just can't help but smile. It's so ridiculous and badass at the same time. You just can't help but have this big, dumb grin. This whole game, I think, is just a really fantastic balance of over-the-top action and grounded character-driven moments. A lot of people say this game is really lacking in plot, but I would disagree with that. There's so many moments in this story that are so exciting and interesting to me. I'm so excited to tell you guys about this, bro. I can't wait. There's a recurring theme in this game when it comes to the music. You'll hear a song play. and you'll think, oh my god, this is the best song in the game, there's no way they could top this. And then you hear the next song play.
I finally found what I was looking for, a place where I can be.
And you're like, oh my god, this is the best one of the game, there's no way they're gonna top this. And then you hear the next song play. And you're like, Jesus, how did they keep doing that? And then you hear the next song play, and it's... The soundtrack is a genre of music that I'd normally never listen to, but I think it works incredibly well with the game, and I've even found myself listening to it on my own time, which, you know, I'd say is a big sign of some absolute bangers. Anyways, you chase Sundowner and the Prime Minister up onto some rooftops and... Oh, you thought the giant robot fight was over? You thought it was over? Look at this guy, he can beat him! This dude starts shooting like lasers and missiles all over the place, and at one point he picks you up and throws you into a clock tower. You have to run down while it's firing missiles at you, and when you hit the bottom, you jump onto it and cut the entire thing in half like an absolute badass. This game is so cool. Once you're done killing the robot for real, Raiden resumes his chase after Sundowner, which leads him onto a moving train. Raiden finds the Prime Minister all chained up with Jetstream Sam and Sundowner, and Sundowner is like... cutting him? I don't know. Honestly, I'm not totally sure why Sundowner brought the Prime Minister onto the train in the first place if his goal is just to kill him, but to each their own, I guess. Sundowner shares his views again and says that he thinks that war is a net positive for the world. He says that the innovation and collaboration that war breeds is worth the deaths that it causes, and then he proceeds to stab the Prime Minister and throw him off the train, Jesus. After doing that, Sundowner pieces out and tells Sam that he's free to kill Raiden. So of course Sam and Raiden start duking it out, and Sam is kinda kicking Raiden's ass a bit. You know, this right here marks the beginning of a game-long rivalry between Sam and Raiden, and I'm a huge fan of the relationship they have with each other, no homo. Sam tells Raiden that he's losing the fight because Raiden isn't giving in to his desire to kill Sam. In response, Raiden says that his sword is a tool of justice. I really like these kinds of opposing philosophies that lay the foundation of the rivalry between Sam and Raiden. Every villain in this game actually has a philosophy that kind of opposes Raiden's, but Sam's and Sundowners are the first we get a glimpse of. Sam believes that in order to be an extraordinary warrior, you should give in to your bloodlust or you'll never have the motivation to be truly great. Raiden disagrees and believes that restraining oneself is what makes the difference between being great or evil. This is going to come up more times throughout the game, but Raiden will do anything in his power not to kill innocent people. Despite thinking he's the heroic one though, Raiden gets one of his eyes and an arm cut off by Sam. Every fight Raiden has with a notable foe in this game is symbolic of clashing ideals, and I think that whoever comes out on top is said by the game to be the one in the right. I think that it's really interesting, this kind of insight into what this game thinks a hero is. Raiden barely manages to be saved by his private military, but I think that his near loss could be symbolic that he's unsure of his ideals, or, you know, maybe Sam's right. Things like this is why I decided to make a video like this on this game, because, you know, this stuff is too interesting for me not to talk about. Alright, I know I just blabbed on for a hot second there, so here's a quick recap, alright? Sundowner killed the Prime Minister, and Raiden is down an arm and an eye thanks to Jetstream Sam. After all that, we jump to 3 weeks later where we find Raiden flying his own little airplane. He's flying to some country that has been completely taken over by terrorists, and he's planning on single-handedly killing all of them and restoring the government. The reason why the country seems to be in such a state of disrepair is because Sundowner and company have been selling weapons to the terrorists, meaning Raiden is probably going to have to look out for Sundowner and Jetstream Sam type of figures. When Raiden reaches his destination and starts tearing up bad guys, he realizes that Sundowner is in charge of a legion of cyborg soldiers. And, you know, this is pretty worrying because Sundowner has a legion of cyborg soldiers. Not worrying for Raiden though, because he's an absolute badass and has also been giving an upgrade due to his arm not being attached to him anymore. Man, I'm sorry, I haven't read through this script in like a month or so, so there's some surprises in here for me too. Some people might think that Raiden looks a little ridiculous, but personally, I really love how he looks after getting his kind of upgrade. He has these surprisingly feminine features with these really long nails and high heels, and he moves in a kind of a feminine way too, but I think this really fits his character and the way he fights in the game. He'll do things like use his nails to scratch people and use his high heels to swing his sword around. It's almost funny, but it's definitely badass. I think he looks really cool. In this level, you get your first taste of non-human enemies also. There's a lot of different robots and cyborgs you fight throughout the game, and this level introduces you to these big bipedal robots that remind me of ATSTs from Star Wars. Raiden walks through a hallway and gets ambushed by the second boss of the game, Blade Wolf. I love how unashamed this game is of the vibes it invokes with ridiculous names like Blade Wolf and Jetstream Sam. Blade Wolf tries to kill Raiden on the spot, but Raiden just barely dodges Blade Wolf's attack, getting his chin scraped on the saw blade. Blade Wolf is, as maybe you've come to expect from this game, a robot dog with knives all over its body and a giant saw blade for a tail. Blade Wolf is a sentient AI that was created to be far smarter than any human being. Only Blade Wolf has no free will and has to follow any orders it's given by Sundowner's people. When Raiden tries asking it questions, it tells him that its memory will be wiped if it doesn't directly obey the orders it's given, and that its only orders to kill Raiden. Unlike other villains in the game, Raiden and Blade Wolf don't really hold opposing philosophies and just kind of find themselves in a situation they have no control of. Raiden even seems to feel bad for Blade Wolf and says, "What good is an intellect if you can't use it?" Raiden, of course, wins the fight because he's Raiden, and Blade Wolf's memory is wiped. Also, he explodes. Raiden's journey around the country then leads him to two people working alongside Sundowner, Andrei Dolzaev and Mistral. These two punks have been selling weapons to terrorists, and Raiden intends on killing both of them. He heads to the top of a big industrial building to confront them, and finds Mistral waiting for him. Mistral tells her story of how she was born into a civil war and first learned to kill when she sought revenge on the people who killed her parents. She's always been good at killing people, but never found a cause worthy of killing for. She was drowning in talent, but her life was devoid of meaning. She then explains that finding Sundowner's operation had been the best thing that had ever happened to her and the first time she ever felt like she had a purpose. Ideals, Jack. What are yours? Raiden says that his purpose is to protect the weak, and Mistral calls him naive. She tells him that if he is willing to kill for his ideals, that he must also be ready to die for them. Okay, I really like Mistral's boss fight. It's such an underrated part of the game that I rarely see people talk about, and it's one of my favorite sections. I love how the setting changes. The inclusion of the little robot guys and I think your soundtrack might be my favorite in the game. Changing locations multiple times throughout the fight gives the impression that Raiden and Mistral are almost flying around the setting like it's a battle between superheroes or something. Very cool. One unfortunate thing about her boss fight though is that it's really easy, and or maybe I should say Raiden, made quick work of her. She dies for a cause, just as she's always wanted to. Andrei Dolzaev sees that Raiden has killed Mistral, and knowing that he's not nearly as capable as her, he kills himself by detonating bombs placed around the structure he's on. He doesn't kill Raiden, of course, but Raiden's no closer to finding out what Sundowner and Sam are doing and stopping them. If I were to summarize this level for you, I'd say Raiden finds a few of Sundowner's associates selling weapons to a terrorist group and kills them. Blade Wolf, Mistral, and Andrei being the associates in mine. Now we fast forward an indeterminate amount of time. I would assume anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. Raiden's now in Mexico looking for a research center of Sundowners that he's caught wind of. Apparently the lab had been dumping illegal waste into Mexico's sewers, as well as maybe trafficking children. Not wanting to be noticed, Raiden brings a disguise to keep him undercover until he gets into the sewers. Additionally, he has a scientist working for his company to rebuild Blade Wolf and remove the memory wiping thing. Raiden now has a pet good boy that has his own free will and is smarter than any human. How can you not like this game? Raiden fights through this, for some reason, robot-infested sewers until he stumbles upon a lone child, George. I love George. Even though Raiden saves his life, he immediately begins making fun of Raiden for being a ninja wading through the sewers of Mexico. George explains that he was offered a job from a businessman and instead ended up on a boat to this laboratory. He says that lots of other kids were on the boat and the laboratory too, and none of them knew why they were there. George overheard his abductors talking about taking out each child's organs and turning them into cyborgs, and tried to warn the other kids, but no one spoke the same language as him, so he just ran away from the research center on his own. Human trafficking and turning children into cyborgs is not poggers, so Raiden leaves George to his own team to find and starts looking for an entrance into the research center. After cleaving through a whole lot more robots, Raiden finds an entrance into the lab, disguised as a wall. What he finds inside will shock you. The bad guys have been removing the children's brains and hooking them up in some Matrix-looking devices. Why exactly, we don't know, but what I do know is that these little sphere guys are adorable. You get to play as one for a little section, it's amazing. It tries to plug in a USB cable it has upside down on the first try. I really like little touches of personality like that. We find a video of Sundowner, a scientist, and a mysterious figure who seems to be in charge of the operation, all talking about how the experiments are going. That's boring stuff though. What Raiden's gotta do right now is find those trafficked kids and save them before their brains get removed. While Raiden's searching the lab for children, he gets a call from his team saying they couldn't find George. That's probably not good, but we don't have time to dwell on that right now because we're fighting a giant tank mech robot and kicking its ass. Once we're done, we get a call informing us that the man in charge in the video was none other than Senator Armstrong, the Senator of Colorado. We're told that we should leave the lab because Armstrong is too powerful with too many connections for us to get away with saving the kids scot-free, but Raiden doesn't listen and goes to save the kids because he thinks it's the right thing to do. When he reaches the children, he finds them locked in a room laying around. After Raiden touches the glass of their enclosure though, chloroform gas starts to fill the children's room and they start to suffocate. He turns around to see the scientist from the video holding a gun to George's head. The scientist says that Raiden can surrender, save George, or save all the other kids. Raiden will be fast enough to save everybody. George tells Raiden that he should choose to save the lives of all the other kids, because George doesn't see his own life as precious. George says that Raiden can kill him and the scientist to solve the problem, and there's nothing the scientist could do about it. Despite the number one goal being saving innocent lives, Raiden seems completely fine with killing George until George moves the scientist's gun to give Raiden an opening to just kill the scientist, which of course he does. Alright, to avoid any confusion, I'm just going to summarize these last few events for you guys. Raiden goes to Mexico to look for a lab of sundowners that has reportedly been dumping illegal waste and trafficking children. Raiden travels through the sewers in order to find the lab, and on his way there, meets a kid who escaped from the lab, George. When Raiden gets into the lab, he finds that the children's brains are being harvested for some reason, and the Senator of Colorado, Senator Armstrong, is in charge of this entire operation. When Raiden tries to save the kids that still have brains, a scientist threatens to kill George, but Raiden just kills the scientist. Alright, got it? Let's keep going. Children are being trafficked, innocent lives are being taken, illegal waste is being dumped, and no one's doing anything about it out of fear of Senator Armstrong's power. Raiden's crew of teammates all tell him they won't support him rushing to stop Armstrong, so Raiden immediately quits the team to drive to Denver and save the children and kill the bad guys himself. While he's driving there, he gets a call from George saying that he's feeling great and wants to help Raiden fight the bad guys. Raiden tells George that killing isn't fun in games, and that you should always avoid it if you can. This is kind of a moment of hypocrisy coming from Raiden, as he kills like 100 guys every level, including the scientist from the lab. He was also okay with the possibility of killing George, and 100% is down to kill Sundowner, Jetstream Sam, and Senator Armstrong. A line from Sam plays in Raiden's head. It yearns to bathe in the blood of your enemies, but you hold it back. Perhaps Raiden is more willing to kill people than he likes to let on. No time to think about that though. Denver's cyborg police are shooting through Raiden's windows and yelling at him. Senator Armstrong being the senator, he's passed bills that have Sundowner's company supply cyborgs to make up Denver's police force, and they all want to kill Raiden. While he's dealing with this, Raiden's instructor calls him asking about why Raiden left his crew. He says that they have to stay within the confines of the law, and that Raiden is behaving recklessly. Besides, the enemies technically import the children's brains legally, saying that it's for medical purposes. Raiden, being the Chad that he is though, just says that just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. Raiden fights his way through the city, over rooftops, and underground until he reaches Jetstream Sam. Kind of. Sam is broadcasting himself to Raiden over the city's billboards and virtual displays. Instead of fighting Raiden, Sam tells Raiden that what he's doing is wrong. He says that Raiden believes he can solve every problem with his sword, always seeming to resort to violence. Raiden disagrees, saying that his sword is only a means to an end. He doesn't want to kill anybody, but he has to in order to stop Senator Armstrong. Sam asks if Raiden really had to kill the hundreds of cyborg soldiers to get to this point, and Raiden says that the soldiers made the choice to fight him. He's basically just acting in self-defense. If someone makes the choice to become a soldier, they've accepted that they may die. Sure, Sam says, they may have the choice to become soldiers, but how much of a choice did they really have? Many of them were homeless and desperate, or amputees without another choice. Of course they seem too eager to kill Raiden. They're constantly being pumped full of fear-inhibiting drugs and getting their pain receptors shut off. The soldiers are so juiced up they don't even know what's going on, and they're sent right into Raiden and his sword, ready and willing to kill every single one of them. Sam tells Raiden that if he listens closely, he can hear the scared thoughts that are being suppressed from the soldiers. Raiden begins to hear the soldiers' internal cries for help and objections to fighting him, and it's just about enough to make him stop fighting. Up until this point at least, I love how Sam is the only antagonist that's really able to challenge Raiden's views on the matter at hand. Mistral and Sundowner have reasons that make sense to do what they do, but no one else is able to cause Raiden's reasons for fighting to make no sense. It really has the player question who really is right here, Raiden or Sam? If anyone can answer that question, it would be Blade Wolf, him being probably the smartest being on Earth and all. Raiden tells Blade Wolf he didn't know that any of the soldiers didn't have a fair choice, and Blade Wolf simply responds by saying that every person is different, and that there's no way anyone could know how every soldier ended up in their situation. Blade Wolf also adds that he had once fought along Jetstream Sam, and Sam was an incredibly capable fighter. Blade Wolf admits that he admires Sam and finds him dependable, but he's now unsure what Sam's goal is. With that, Raiden finds his way into Armstrong's headquarters and meets Sam at the entrance. Sam gives Raiden a little "I told you so" before the show gets stolen by an absolute legend, Monsoon. Monsoon is like made of magnets and always has electricity flowing around him. Also, he has a really cool helmet. Monsoon essentially summarizes what Sam has said. How easily you ignore the loss of life when it suits your convenience. Who saves the weak from the man who saves the weak? Raiden seems to doubt himself more than ever, and rebuttals saying it wasn't his fault that so many people had died, but instead their faults because they were the ones sending people to be killed by him. Monsoon simply says, "It's kill or be killed." Monsoon rejects most of what people think holds value today. Free will is a myth, religion is a joke. We're all pawns being controlled by something greater. Memes. Monsoon has no issue with this lack of free will though, as he sees it as part of nature. He believes that the strong will always prey on the weak, and that's how it should be, and that's how it always will be. He then takes a step too far and calls Raiden's Sword of Justice a meme. Not cool. He says that Raiden should rightfully feel guilty about the lives that he has taken, and that the belief that he's dishing out justice is only an excuse to absolve himself of shame. Monsoon tells Raiden not to feel bad though, as nature does not judge and simply is. After inspiring Raiden to have a clear conscience, Monsoon is ready to kill Raiden. Raiden admits that though he thought he could live a normal life, he has been proven incorrect. Seeing he's standing toe-to-toe with a magnet man on his way to kill the senator of Colorado, you know? Raiden admits that one of the earliest lessons he learned was that to kill your enemies felt good. Really good. Raiden thought he had grown past enjoying killing and that he had finally become a tool of justice, but he was wrong. He was born to kill. He says that he used his justice spiel to keep himself in check, a reminder that he was killing people for a cause bigger than himself. Perversely though, he had still ended up ending the lives of so many people to get here. Debated up against a wall, Raiden realizes something he had fought long and hard to never consider. He's a killer. He loves it, and he shouldn't let anything get in the way of him doing what he loves. In this moment, Raiden gives up on fighting for justice and accepts that, at least partially, he fights for himself. He commands that his pain inhibitors are deactivated, my bad. He commands that his pain inhibitors are deactivated and grins as he exclaims, "This is my nature." Monsoon ushers Sam away, wanting to take on the true Raiden himself. So this is a really interesting moment for Raiden's character, when he's faced with the prospect that he's probably doing horrible things in order to reach his end goal. Instead of scrambling for reasons to deny it, he accepts that it's true, and it's something he actually wants to do. I think this is super cool because it's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect a typical character development to be. Instead of being okay with doing bad things and later learning to behave better, he instead goes from fighting for justice to killing for himself. Not only is it a fairly unique moment of character development though, but it's also a really cool example of ludonarrative harmony. I know those of you who watched video essays have heard this talked about in probably every single one, but I gotta say this for the guys that aren't in the know, I'm sorry. The ludonarrative of a game is basically the relationship between the story of the game and the gameplay or your actions. Oftentimes in a game, you as the player do things that the character you're playing as wouldn't or couldn't do. One common example is a game's main character being depicted as a lovable, decent person, even though you as the player will kill dozens of people during gameplay. When your actions or feelings and the character's actions or feelings are the same or similar, this is referred to as ludonarrative harmony. When your actions or feelings and the character's actions or feelings are different, that's referred to as ludonarrative dissonance. When Raiden decides that he's not killing to do the right thing, but because he likes doing it, his feeling of enjoying killing aligns with the player's enjoyment of killing enemies in the game. After a dissonance between Raiden not wanting to kill and the player wanting to kill, up until now, it's a very interesting and maybe even powerful moment of Raiden and the player coming to an agreement. With all of that said, the fight against Monsoon is super fun and tense and one of the hardest in the game for sure. You can't hit him for a lot of the fight because he moves and his magnets move around so you can't touch him, so for most of the fight you're just desperately parrying one attack after another. The fight ends with Raiden running up what looks like a miniature Washington monument, slamming Monsoon into the side of a skyscraper and cutting him into free samples. Nice. Once Monsoon is dead, Raiden's free to waltz on into Armstrong's headquarters, where he begins searching for the child cyborg soldiers to be. There's one cool part here that I figure is worth mentioning, where Raiden uses flying enemies to jump onto the side of the skyscraper, and then proceeds to run up the skyscraper while missiles are being fired at him. When he reaches the upper floors of the building, it's revealed that a higher up in the business is a complete weeb, and has redecorated an entire floor to be a Japanese garden complete with sakura trees and hot ninjas. Sakura? Sakura? Past that, he fights through an elevator ride, a second Mistral fight, and a second Monsoon fight. Jeez, we fought him like 20 minutes ago. After all that's done though, Raiden finally gets to see the room where the magic happens, and it's revealed by Sundowner that they've been removing children's brains, training them in simulations, and putting the brains into robot bodies in order to make the perfect military. Sundown is portrayed as comically evil, his thing literally being trafficking children and taking their brains out. He talks about what he's doing to the children with a smug satisfaction and basks in the horror of what he's doing. He literally makes fun of people that subscribe to any kind of morality, and then complains that war crimes exist. In the end, all Sundowner really cares about is making money, and in order to do that, he's just gotta keep supplying wars. Sundowner says that Raiden can't possibly stop him because this operation is being done around the world. Besides, if Sundowner dies, someone else will just take his place eventually. He doesn't create the market for war, he just supplies it. Sundowner says what I imagine to be a prod making fun of the Metal Gear series, or maybe the fans of it, when he says,
"Did you think every battle in history was all part of some big old conspiracy?"
Raiden then follows Sundowner to the roof of the building, where it's revealed that something big is gonna happen in 3 hours, and Raiden will be powerless to stop it. Kinda weird, but okay. I love the line, "Kids are cruel, Jack, and I'm very in touch with my inner child." The Sundowner fight is one that I initially didn't like, but after fighting him many times, I've grown to really appreciate this battle. The gimmick is that you can't hit sundowner shields or you'll take damage, and once you get good at knowing when to hold back your hits, the fight becomes pretty easy. The fight ends with Raiden falling off of the skyscraper, where he then grabs onto a flying enemy and flies it through the skyscraper into Sundowner. Very cool. Once Sundowner is no more, we learn that in 3 hours, the President of the USA will be attacked on his way to Pakistan in order to incite yet more conflict to make Armstrong even more money. The problem is, the President is about 4,000 miles away, and Raiden has no way of getting to him. After a quick brainstorm, it's decided that Raiden is going to be flown to a launch site where he will fly on a rocket to the location of the attack and stop whatever's going to go down. I love this game. The game's tone seems to be switching wildly between over-the-top ridiculous action and quiet, insightful, philosophical conversation. 1 second you'll be watching Raiden cut an airplane in half, and literally 3 minutes later you'll be listening to a lecture about the dangers of the war economy. Despite these two tones being pretty different from each other, I think that at least in this game they go absolutely perfectly together. If all Metal Gear games are like this, I will be playing the rest of them. Anyways, Raiden cuts a plane in half. Unfortunately though, after doing so, he falls to the ground and is unable to get a ride to the rocket he plans to, save the President on. How's he gonna get himself out of this one? He finds a motorcycle and rides to the rocket himself, of course. Just when Raiden's closing in on the launch site and everything seems like it'll go according to plan, Raiden finds Jetstream Sam and Blade Wolf waiting for him in the desert. Blade Wolf tells Raiden he can't figure out what Sam wants. Raiden seems like he doesn't know either, remarking that Sam could have easily reached the launch site before Raiden and killed everyone there. Sam tells Raiden that they've both heard more than enough speeches about ideals at this point. History will decide who's right. With that, Raiden and Sam agree to a duel. Our protagonist versus the only enemy that's ever made him question what he's doing, and only one of them are going to come out of this alive. Raiden says that it doesn't matter if he's right or wrong for killing Sam, it's something he has to do. Sam seems distracted when Raiden says this, suggesting the possibility that Sam has nothing against Raiden and doesn't even really want to kill him. Blade Wolf asks if it's necessary that they fight, and in response, Raiden and Sam agree that this is something that needs to happen. Instead of a clash of ideals, this duel seems to be the effect of raw emotion. Raiden is furious with Sam for helping Armstrong and cutting off his arm. Sam, on the other hand, seems to be doing this more for fun than anything. Raiden finally has the chance to take revenge, and Sam has finally found a worthy opponent. It ends here. I adore this fight against Sam. There's no gimmicks, no other enemies, just you and Sam in a showdown. He propels himself around the desert, coming at you from all angles, and trying to dodge and parry his attacks is exhilarating. If I had to complain though, I'd say I kinda wish the fight was harder. Even on these harder difficulty options, I found myself being able to breeze through the fight, rarely getting hit, and I think this kinda took away from the feeling of facing a worthy opponent. With that said though, I adore this fight. The fight, as you might have expected, ends with Raiden stabbing Sam and winning the duel. When Sam realizes that it's over and he's going to die, he just simply laughs and winks at Blade Wolf before lying down and passing away. Raiden remarks that Sam didn't even seem to have any cyborg enhancements, which is appalling because just about every other enemy Raiden fought had enhancements and Sam was stronger than all of them. Blade Wolf says he can't tell if this outcome was necessary. Raiden picks up Sam's sword and Blade Wolf tells him that Sam inherited it from his father. Blade Wolf decides to hold on to the sword in order to commemorate Sam. There's such a beautiful, absolutely Metal Gear Rising moment where Raiden solemnly and dramatically sheathes Sam's sword with the setting sun behind him, and I love it so much. It's just so perfect for this game. In true Metal Gear Rising fashion, that dramatic scene is immediately followed up by one of a launch site security guard doing, weeb stuff. It's pretty funny though when Blade Wolf walks up to the security guy and the guy can't tell if it's Raiden or not. Doesn't even matter because Raiden just tears through the doors to the launch site. Alright, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. There's a girl at the launch site that seems to know Raiden and built an entire rocket for him for this purpose, but I don't really know who she is or why Raiden knows her. I think she was a character in past Metal Gear game or something like that, but it doesn't really matter too much because before we know it, Raiden's blasting off to a military base owned by Armstrong. I feel like I'm saying half of this in broken English, I'm so sorry. After killing just about everyone in the base, Raiden spots Blade Wolf pretty beat up and begins to look around for who did it. To his surprise, a giant hole opens up beneath Raiden and a ginormous robot ant thing crawls out, and on top of it is the Senator of Colorado, Senator Armstrong. This is it, the moment you've all been waiting for. If you know anything about this game, it's probably this fight right here, and that's for a good reason. It's incredible. It's like half an hour of speeches, showdowns, and spectacles. It's gotta be one of my favorite fights in any game. Armstrong comes out of the gates with heat, calling you Saucy Jack. The conversation Raiden and Armstrong have throughout the fight is just as good as the fight itself. Raiden tells Armstrong that his plan ends here, so Armstrong tells him to check Twitter. Raiden's raid on his military base was recorded and posted online, being referred to as a terrorist attack against America, and people are furious. Raiden says that Armstrong couldn't start a war over just a few deaths at the base, and Armstrong says that Americans have wanted a war for years and now have an excuse to have one, even if it's somewhat small. Armstrong explains that war is good for the economy, and that Americans who lack faith and ideals seek meaning in the money that they have instead of the beliefs they lack. If you control the money, you control the only thing the American people value. War is just the best way to keep the cash flowing. Besides, Armstrong isn't going to kill any civilians. With the war on terror, the only casualties would be extremists and madmen. Unfortunately for Raiden, he's on Armstrong's list of such individuals. With that, he jumps into the giant robot to pilot it and begins to fight Raiden. This is the first part of the fight, and it's probably the worst part too. It's kinda slow and unsatisfying to fight something as large as this, but luckily it ends with Raiden cutting off one of the robot's giant swords and sword fighting the robot. After that, Raiden jumps on top of the robot to fight Armstrong, mano a mano. Armstrong leaves the cockpit and immediately begins sucking these green beams of light into his body. Those green beams of light are nanomachines that once inside of Armstrong's body make him immune to any physical trauma and make him incredibly strong. He starts beating the crap out of Raiden while talking about how he played football in college and could have gone pro if he wanted. I just love his dialogue so much. I could break the president in two with my bare hands. He's such a caricature of an American and a man, it's hilarious. He tosses Raiden into the air and punts him like a football, like, come on. They literally added a crowd cheering sound effect after he did the kick. Raiden asks Armstrong what the hell he is, as due to his nanomachines, Armstrong physically is the strongest foe Raiden has faced thus far. Armstrong tells Raiden to stick around and find out, and with that, the next phase of the fight begins. You swing at Armstrong for a while, barely chipping away at his health bar while he hits you with devastating blows. After a sec, he catches your sword and breaks it in half with one fist. He then goes to punch Raiden in the jaw, and Raiden dodges out of the way just in time. I love this moment, because the entire game, Raiden has been getting hit in the jaw. One example I can think of off the top of my head is when Raiden first meets Blade Wolf, he gets his jaw scraped. After a whole game of jaw abuse though, Raiden finally successfully dodges one. He even feels his jaw in relief and smiles to himself while triumphant music plays. He's then fisted into oblivion immediately after. He slides his face across the length of the entire robot, and when he gets up, his whole chin is red hot. Seeing as he couldn't beat the Senator in a battle of strength, he instead tries to beat the Senator in a battle of wit. He calls Armstrong a typical politician because all he cares about is making more money. When he does this, Armstrong is taken aback and Raiden has a chance to get a punch in. Raiden starts getting a few hits off and keeps going with the shtick. He tells Armstrong he has no principles and is just feeding off the American people instead of helping them. Armstrong knows what he must do. Tell Raiden the truth. There's one thing that Senator Armstrong cares about above all else, and that is absolute freedom. In his ideal world, every single person has complete control over their own destiny. He wants a nation of action, not words, a nation of strength, not committee. He wants every ounce of power to be held by the people. He hates bureaucracy. He hates politics. He hates memes. He hates American pride. He hates the media. America is diseased, rotten to the core. Armstrong believes that the government and the people of America are corrupt beyond repair and couldn't really change anything if they wanted to, and wants to see a world where any one person could have the power to change the world instead of a faceless government or corporation. Just as Monsoon believed that in nature, the weak are meant to be killed by the strong, Armstrong believes that in government, the strong should be able to rule the weak. Armstrong is using war as a business to get elected president, so he can end war as a business. Armstrong looks around himself and sees that people don't fight for themselves, they fight for their country, for their business. Armstrong wants a country with people fight for what they can believe, not for money, not for oil, not because they're told to, but because they care. Armstrong asks Raiden what he thinks.
How the hell did you get elected?
Raiden admits that perhaps he was wrong about Armstrong. No more pointless wars, no more cowardly leaders. Raiden says, "You're not greedy."
You're batshit insane!
Wow, I love this game. This shot right here is a classic, with Armstrong looking between his legs at Raiden. It's so unnecessary and it's kinda hilarious. I don't know why the designers made the decision to have Armstrong do that, but it's just such a perfect fit for the game tonally. Making the mother of all omelets here, Jack. Can't fret over every egg. This one fight has more famous lines than most games do. It's very impressive. Raiden tells Armstrong that he's wrong. Armstrong has never been weak, he's never been poor, he's never been hungry, he's never had to fight just to survive like Raiden has. Why can Armstrong say what should happen to the weak? But Raiden did survive through following his own rules and becoming strong, just as Armstrong wants the American people to do. Raiden was born weak, but he took back his own life by fighting for himself. And now he's going to take out Armstrong's. In phase 3 of the fight, you face Armstrong without a sword. It's nearly impossible. Hitting him takes fractions of a percent of his health away, and you can tear away half of your health bar with unblockable attacks. Once Raiden reaches about 0.1% health, he musters all of his strength to hit Armstrong with everything he's got. Look familiar? This right here is the 70th pop culture touchstone in this fight, and I wouldn't have it anyway. I love these. Maybe you guys have noticed, but as the fight goes on, Armstrong wears less and less clothing as time passes. Like, he started in a full suit, and after all these punches, he just rips his shirt off. His shirt isn't the only thing that's ripped though, goddamn! Right here is also where cultural touchstone number 600 is. Nanomachines, son. This one might even be the most popular too. He reveals to Raiden that while the nanomachines are inside him, he physically cannot be hurt. It's Armstrong's turn to do the punching thing now, but this one's not nearly as cool or iconic. Meanwhile, Jetstream Sam's sword begins to blink and Blade Wolf takes notice. Armstrong punches Raiden so hard that the entire robot they're standing on explodes, and Armstrong and Raiden are left to fight in the rubble. This is another iconic shot, Armstrong cracking his knuckles and walking towards Raiden with flames behind him. He gets interrupted though by Blade Wolf. The music that plays in this scene is so funny to me. It's like the most dramatic, triumphant on your last legs kind of music, and I absolutely love it. I just love how hard this game leans into what it is, and I really think that's why it's so great. Blade Wolf stands atop one of the robot's arms, Sam's blade in its mouth. Blade Wolf plays some audio he had recorded earlier, and it's Sam talking. 2 years I've been working towards this, and on the last day, Blondie has me doubting the whole thing. We'll leave it up to fate then. A duel to the death. May the best man win. The recording is from right before Raiden came across Sam and Blade Wolf in the desert. If Sam were to win the duel, nothing would change, but if Raiden were to win the duel, the lock on Sam's blade would be disabled and it would be Raiden's to use. This is very good news considering Raiden currently doesn't have a sword. Armstrong tells Blade Wolf he'll kill him after he kills Raiden, and Blade Wolf says he wasn't programmed to fear death. Blade Wolf says that when Raiden and Sam fought, he wasn't sure he would win, or if they should even fight, and he realized he would never know such things if he only followed the directives already programmed into him. Blade Wolf has decided that he's going to establish his own parameters from now on, and his first order of business is to throw Sam's sword to Raiden. Armstrong tries to catch it, but it's too late. Raiden now gets to say maybe my favorite lines in the entire game.
Damn much! Armstrong! Duh!
Raiden's voice echoes so cinematically and dramatically, it's beautiful. Look at how he's posed. He's a madman, I love him. I said my sword was a tool of justice. Not used in anger, not used for vengeance. But now, I'm not so sure. And besides...
This isn't my sword.
The first time I experienced this, I lost it. Like, this scene right here cemented this game as not just one of the best I played all year, but one of my favorites of all time. Like, I was straight up fangirling right here, and I was so absolutely pumped to beat the crap out of Armstrong. It was so hype. This marks the beginning of the 600th and final phase of the fight against Senator Armstrong. He takes his glasses off, you take your sword out, and the game slaps you with its most iconic song. You know the one. Armstrong throws everything he's got at you in this final stage. He's punching you, he's splitting cracks in the earth, he's throwing giant pieces of rubble. Sometimes he'll knock the sword out of Raiden's hand, and you'll have to go get it in order to keep doing damage to him. In between all this are these mini cinematic moments where Raiden and Armstrong will trade blows or do some crazy wrestling move type stuff. This is really common knowledge at this point, but this has got to be one of the greatest boss fights of all time. Something that I think is super cool about this last part is the setting that it takes place in. The robot is destroyed and Raiden and Armstrong are completely surrounded by debris, and it lends to the sense of not knowing where you are. The sky is an unnatural color, there's giant robot chunks everywhere, and everything's on fire. It really doesn't feel like you're on Earth. This lack of a tangible setting all just takes the player's complete focus that would be on their surroundings and directs it absolutely, completely, solely at Armstrong. This final showdown really feels like you've been on a journey, and this man is all that stands between you and victory. It's nothing short of beautiful. At the end of the fight, Raiden and Armstrong stand close, and Raiden has to deflect punch after punch that Armstrong hits him with. It's no use though, because as Armstrong's nanomachines fill his arms, Raiden is able to stab Armstrong through the stomach. Even still, Armstrong keeps trying to kill Raiden. They grapple until Raiden hits the sword further into Armstrong with his head, and Raiden proceeds to slash at Armstrong's heart until he sticks his whole hand into Armstrong and literally grabs him by the heart. Well done, Jack. Armstrong congratulates Raiden on winning the fight. Your dream dies with you, says Raiden. But before he's able to pull out Armstrong's heart, Armstrong pulls Raiden back in to say his last words. Raiden is guaranteed the status quo will go on for now. War will remain an industry. Men will fight for reasons they don't understand, and causes they don't believe in. Hope is not lost, though. Armstrong recognizes that perhaps nobody displays his own ideals more plainly than Raiden himself. Raiden carves his own path, using whatever methods he sees fit. Raiden doesn't let the law get in the way, and he doesn't mind if a few people lose their lives. Armstrong believes that everyone should be able to fight for what they want, and Raiden disagreed, so he fought Armstrong for what he wanted. To defeat Armstrong is to prove him right. Raiden saw the world he wanted, one without Armstrong, and he fought for it until he got it. Maybe Raiden could be a successor to Armstrong. Maybe he already is. Raiden grabs Armstrong's shoulder and rips his heart out of his chest. Even his heart is powerful, beating like thunder. Raiden finishes the deed and crushes Armstrong's heart in his hand. Deep inside, we're kindred spirits, you and I. These are Armstrong's last words. Raiden's depicted standing above the body of Armstrong, almost seeming to mirror him visually, one a reflection of the other. Raiden silently stands above the body for a while and ponders. The game cuts to about a year in the future. No war's broken out, but tensions are still high between many countries. At least Armstrong isn't president. Raiden's team gets a call from one of their members, telling them that they just finished setting up the world's first cyborg staffing firm. Cyborg? With Armstrong's operation dismantled, they had an army of cyborg children on their hands and figured they'd put them to good use. Oh my god, good use. The kids are doing it voluntarily, I promise. This is a happy ending. We also learn that George has been taken on as a new recruit for Raiden's team, which is wonderful because he was absolutely pumped to learn that Raiden was a ninja. We see George smooth talking that one spaceship girl. I think it's really funny how even though George speaks English, his subtitles include translations, and all the translations are like really proper English. It's just really funny to see him say, "You make me head spin, you know," and to have the subtitle say, "Man, Sonny, you're really something." They even translated him saying, "Yeah, okay," into "all right." Blade Wolf is even there, sleeping under the girl's desk like an actual dog, which is adorable. It's a crazy world, huh? They both talk to each other about how Raiden changed each of their lives. George says he never imagined the life he lives now, going from the slums of Guyana to being a whole cyborg ninja in training. Life's wild. The girl says that Raiden once saved her life and that she owes him everything. To some people, he'll always be Jack the Ripper, but to these two kids, Raiden is a hero. And with that, the credits roll. Raiden isn't good. He slaughtered countless people. Many of them could be argued innocent, but Raiden isn't bad either. He does what he believes he needs to do to make the world a better place. There will always be people cowering in fear of the Ripper, but there will always be so many more depending on him to keep them safe. There's an after-credits scene where Raiden is calling a member of his team, and they tell him that Armstrong may be dead, and his operation may be in shambles, but it's not gone. The demand for weapons will continue, and someone will always be willing to supply them. Private military companies are going up in demand worldwide, and someone's gonna operate them. Raiden agrees, and he says these words, "Yeah, fighting for reasons they don't understand, causes they don't believe in." He's made up his mind, and he doesn't want to work for his team anymore. Raiden's ready to face his own problems, fight his own wars, stand up for what he believes in. He'll be able to carve his own path with whatever methods he sees fit. He won't have to worry about the law. If a few people lose their lives, so be it. His former partner asks what he'll be doing from now on, and in the very final scene of the game, Raiden smiles as he unsheathes his blade and says, "I've got my own war to fight." Wow, I love this game so much. Just telling you guys about the story, I wrote about 10,000 words across 20 pages, meaning this will probably be my longest video ever, and I don't even want to think about how long this is going to take to edit. I'm really happy to have my longest video ever be about this game though, however incoherent and rambling it is. I'm assuming that some of you watching this video assumed it would be a video essay due to the length, but it's not. I have no point to make, no lesson to teach. I just really love Metal Gear Rising, and I hope maybe you do now too. Between you and me, I am seriously considering spending $400 on a Raiden figure. I've actually owned the game for a really long time and just decided to play it recently because all the memes going around. Interestingly though, as someone who's been on the internet regularly, this is like the 5th round of Metal Gear Rising memes I've seen since the game's release. I feel like no matter how much time passes, this game always seems to find a way back into people's minds, and now I can definitely see why. Very rarely do I touch a game after I finish it, but I've beaten this game 5 times now and beat every boss without taking damage. I didn't gain anything from it, it's just really fun. I watch all the cutscenes every playthrough too. This game would make a really good movie, I think. Despite how much I praise the plot, it's typically cited as the weakest part of the game. And one reason for that is definitely that the story is underappreciated. It's nothing mind-blowing or even life-changing, but I just think they did the cheesy action movie thing so incredibly well. The story is ridiculously fun and entertaining, and isn't that what matters in a game like this anyways? The story being overlooked may be one reason for why people call the plot the weakest part of the game, but there's definitely another. This is some of the best gameplay I've ever experienced, period. I vividly remember the moment the gameplay clicked for me. It's deceptively simple. There are 2 buttons for 2 different attacks, and if the enemy swings at you, you can parry the attack by facing them and attacking right before they hit you. The parrying is everything. It's not super necessary on lower difficulties until you reach Blade Wolf. He absolutely kicked my ass for like an hour straight because I just did not understand how to use the mechanic. But on one attempt, I just accidentally parried his attack and everything changed. What used to be terrifying blows were now opportunities for just more damage. There used to be so much downtime between me running away from Blade Wolf and getting hit by him, but now it was a constant flurry of blades. This game got me to stop button mashing in order to focus on parrying and comboing. Me. Stop button mashing. That's insane. This game feels like it's high quality. It's Nintendo level. There are so many systems at play in the combat, and you can use them as shallowly or as deeply as you want. There are 2 buttons for attacking. You don't have to know any combos at all. You can absolutely play through the game just pressing the 2 buttons in a random order. But if you want to go deeper, there's so many combos to learn and so many ways to chain attacks. You can also play through the game just parrying and even attack normally, but if you want to go deeper, you can try to parry every attack the instant before it hits to do a bonus attack on the enemy that leaves them vulnerable for a finishing move. You can go through the game using the blade mode to cut through doors and fight bosses, but if you want to go deeper, you can cut off enemies' limbs to make them weaker or rip out their hearts for extra health. The game has an entire system for dodging attacks that it never mentions once. The only way I found out about it was when I was looking through how to dodge these unparryable yellow attacks from enemies and learned that you're supposed to dodge them. After learning that, I could go ham on enemies and not even have to run away during those attacks. I could just quickly dodge to the side and keep hitting them. The game rewards deeper gameplay too. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with Devil May Cry and Platinum Games' combat rating system, and this game has one too. If you don't interact deeply with the game systems, you get a low score. If you use the hell out of them, you get a high score. It's just a simple but effective way to let players do what they want, but still encourage them to, better engage with the game. The soundtrack even has layers to it. It's a fairly unique one in that a lot of the game's music has lyrics, which in games is pretty uncommon. It's for a reason though, because you don't get to meet each boss for very long. The lyrics of each song that plays during each boss battle contains things about each boss's past or personality. If you didn't get that, Mistral felt like an outsider her whole life until she found Armstrong from talking to her. Her song characterizes her with lyrics like, "Because I'm a stranger who has found an even stranger war, I found what I was looking for." Bars. I think that it's such a clever idea because you don't get much time with each boss. Also, Mistral's song is an absolute banger. Metal Gear Rising is a game I'm very, very happy I played, and it turned me on to its entire genre. For the past few months, all I've thought about and talked about are character action games, and I could not be happier. I have goals to play Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Ultra Kill, and Vanquish. I wish there were more games in the genre, or at least games that were available on Steam. And classics like God Hand and Beautiful Joe, I'm not sure how to get my little grubby mitts on. If you've watched this far into my longest video ever, I want to thank you. Being a channel with about 300 subscribers, I don't typically expect people to watch my videos in the first place, much less watch an hour and a half straight, so you're kind of a legend. I am fully aware this entire video is an hour of incoherent fangirling, and I am absolutely not going to go back and edit this script. My previous longest script was literally a tenth of the length of this. I don't get paid to do this. I'm not a professional, okay? I know a lot of small YouTubers do the guilt people into subscribing to my small channel kind of thing, and I promise that's not what I'm trying to do when I say I'm aware that a lot of people are not going to get this far into the video. First and foremost, this video is a monument to my love of Metal Gear Rising, and oh boy is it a monument. It's got to be 90 minutes of nonsense, but it's 90 minutes of nonsense out of love. I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I really want you to have an incredible day or night, whatever it is. I hope it's the best one you've ever had. Thank you.